Welcome back to the Quilty Life, and this is an episode about improv log cabins. So this is a quilt I made a while back, and it's all made with improv log cabin blocks. And what does that mean? Let's use this one, for example, right here. This is a block. So I started with this little sort of reddish color there, and then I added that little pink on, and then I added this longer one on, and then I added that on, and then I added this. So you just keep working your way out in a spiral. So you can see here I started some of these with little tiny squares like that, some of them bigger, sort of not squarish. This one is not squarish. This one's long and skinny. So I started them out with different shapes in the middle, and that makes it a little bit different on the way out. And depending on, like this one out here, whenever you do this, if you cut it a little wonky as you go, it gets a little off. It looks kind of cool. So I then did all of these, and then I arranged them in this particular pattern. So let's look at a few more examples. This one, these are all some that are not really done improvisationally for the most part. They were kind of cut to size. So let's look at this one. This is not like the ones that were here. This one, I started with this, I added that, and then I added this and this and this and this and this. So it's still, you're adding on sides, but this doesn't end up in the middle. It ends up on a corner. So the same sort of thing happened in this one. I started with that, and I added this one little piece, and then that, and then that, and then that. And then I did 4 exactly the same, and you can arrange them to sort of make a pinwheel looking thing. This one is sort of like that too. It's like this, and then I just added corners on, and I swapped out the colors. This one started, these two started with the light and then worked out, and these two started with the dark and worked out. So depending on how you put your fabrics, when you put them together, they make a cool secondary pattern. And then this one, I started with this, I added that, and then instead of going around, I added these 2 sides, and then this one over here. So when you're doing wonky, you can do that. You don't have to keep going around. You can change up your direction, or you can go, add these 2 on, and then these 2 on. You can do whatever you want. So don't feel like you have to go clockwise and you have to keep that up the entire time, because you don't. You can do whatever you want. So let's look at one more thing before we move on to this. These are the same idea, sort of, but I started with a triangle, and then I kept it, and I kept building out in a triangle way. This one, I sort of did the same thing, but I kept the triangle on the edge, and then I kept adding out like that. This one, I started with a piece in the middle. I had some leftover stuff, so I cut that chunk and made that my middle, and then I added things onto that. And then I wanted to show you this one last thing. I basically did a bunch of them that were like this. And then once I got it, and see, some of them I squared off. I didn't keep them pointy. And then once I got that, then I put 6 of them together to make this sort of crazy looking hexagon piece. I do want to show one more thing. I forgot about that one. This is a mini quilt that Sandra Kay made for me, and it was for the mini swap at QuiltCon in Atlanta. So this is what she gave me, and it's so cute. I love it so much. She did such a nice job. But this is technically improv log cabins. She started out with a little one here in the middle, and then she put these 2 little tiny white ones, and then she put 2 little tiny white ones, and then 2 little greens, and then 2 little greens. So that's how she built all of these. And they're just so tiny and small. So thank you again, Sandra. They're so good. All right, let's move on to how we're going to make some of them. Now, if you've watched the earlier episodes, 1, 2, and 3, you'll recognize some of these fabrics. These are some of the scraps I had left over. So I am going to, let's just do red for some of the middles. That way we can keep track of where the middles are in the pieces as we work. And normally I would probably iron that, but we're not going to worry about it right now. I'll just cut that off so it's a little flatter. All right, so I'm going to do 3 different blocks at the same time for you. I'm going to start this one sort of on the square side. I'm going to start this one with a triangle, and then I'm going to start this one with a multi-sided piece that sort of looks like, yeah, let's go with that. All right, so that's what we're going to go with. Now we're going to add a side to each of these. Now I have all kinds of various things in here. Some of these are left over from what we pieced in the first few episodes. Some of them I dug out of my scrap bin. I've got this nice yellow here, so let's go with that. That's got some selvage, so we'll cut that off. So here's the thing. You don't have to worry if these are square. Obviously, we're going to cut them down later, but you need them just to cover the side. That's it. That's the only qualification. So we're going to sew those together, and then let's switch it out and do different for each one. Let's just sew that one on, because when you flip that out, we need to be able to cut that angle out there. So we need to make sure this is long enough. If you cut it down to here, when you flip it out, you're going to lose some of your triangle. So we'll go with that. And then on this one, let's put a chunk of, let's see, I've got this triangle chunk of orange here. I don't need quite that much. Let's see. Let's go for like that. So that's how I usually think about it. I lay it on here, and then I think about what is that going to look like when I flip it out. So instead of trying to put it here and thinking about that, I think, okay, when I flip this out and then I try to cut these lines, will I have enough to extend out? And I do in this case, so that is what I'm going to do. So that's where I'm going to sew along there. All right, I'll go sew those, and then we'll go on to the next step. So these are sewn now, and all we have to do is press them. And I'm always going to press to the dark side in cases like this, unless for some reason, let's say like in, it's very tiny pieces, then you want, or one side's really small, press towards the larger side, but mostly press towards the dark side so you don't get any weird shadowing is my suggestion. I'll do that and press. And now we'll add on to the next side. So let's look at this one. I'm going to get this ruler out. And before we add a side on, I find it helpful to straighten up the edge. Now you can do that with or without a ruler. It's up to you. I've just done it with a ruler in this case. I'll do it without a ruler in this case. And I'll do it without a ruler in this case. I'll just make sure I cut all the way across. Then it's super straight. All right, now let's add on a piece to the other side. So we'll do this. And again, we make sure that's going to come here. That's going to go there. So if we cut it about here, we should be good. Put that one onto that side. And then let's see. Let's try what happens if we do this. That doesn't give us enough. Okay, so see right here, we know that if we put this here, then when we cut this, because we're probably going to have to cut those off anyway. I don't like that. It's too short. Doesn't give us enough meat on the bone. Let's just do this one, and then we know we got plenty to work with. And then this one over here, let's do a blue. We haven't done any blue. So we'll do that. So we'll put these like this, and these like this. And I'll go sew those. So I've sewn those, and I went ahead and pressed them. In these two, I pressed towards the ones that are darker. In this one, it was hard to tell which one was darker. So I just pressed towards that side and just made sure that I wasn't going to have any shadowing in through here. So sometimes you might have to trim down a seam allowance or something like that. So just keep that in mind so you make sure you don't get any weird shadowing. All right, so let's add on the next side. We will chop and chop and chop. And remember, you can add, let's go this direction. You can add them on either side. Remember, it doesn't matter if you keep going around the same direction or not. Okay, but I want to try to center this one up since that's the way I was going with all of these. All right, so on to the next. So I've added another round to each of them. So we have now gone around 3 sides of that one. This one only has 3 sides. So we've made one full circle around that one. And this one, we're about halfway around. So let's look at the one that we've already done a full round. So usually what I like to do at this point, instead of keep building like I have been, where I just chop one side off at a time, is I will think about where I want this to go from here. So I'm going to, instead of, because normally what I would do, I just added this, I would just turn this and add here. Instead of doing that, I'm going to cut this down a little bit. So I'm going to cut out like this. Now you could cut this so it's a nice straight strip like that, but things don't stay quite wonky enough for my taste. All right. So I'm going to trim that one off so it's sort of like that. And then I'm going to think about, okay, now what's going to happen on this side? All right, well, let's cut that off straight. And now look, I've got this extra thing. Now I have to decide, do I like that, or should I go back and try to trim this so I have this? And I'm okay with it switching to be a 4-sided sort of thing, or maybe a 5-sided. Let's actually make it a 3-sided. So we will cut this from there to there. And now when we go around in the next circle all the way around, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sides we need to fill in. So this just sort of cleans things up and lets you make some decisions at each round. And that's what I usually do. I wait until I get all the way around whatever my middle piece is. Or if you're keeping this on the edge in the corner, after you've done 2, then you do it and then add more like that. So I'm going to keep on going around these other 2 right here until we're finished with that, and then we will make some decisions about squaring those up. All right, I've now gone around all of the red centers, and that one we already took care of. This one here, now we could just cut this and keep going rectangular. If that's the way you want it to look, that's cool. So let's actually keep this one pretty rectangular. Let's don't try to make it as wonky and crazy as some of the other ones. That way we have sort of a mix between super wonky and more on the, more traditional side. Now this one, how are we going to do this? So I'm going to start on that side. And I think I'm just going to kind of keep up the shape that's been building out here for the most part. Let's cut that. And now right here, this is where we have to be careful, because if I cut out here, which I'm kind of tempted to do, then you're going to have a little notch here. So you got to be careful that you got enough coverage. I'm going to bust out the ruler for this part just so right there, I just make sure I'm going to have enough seam allowance underneath and that I don't get a hole. All right, so that's the important thing. And now we have this that we're working with. Now you look at this and you're like, well, this seems really, really like a giant chunk out here, and maybe I'll like that and maybe I don't. If I don't like that, I can cut it down. I can cut an angle. I could do anything I want at this point. I'm going to leave it like that because we've been using this fabric in our other episodes, and it'll kind of make all of these go together in the end. Now you're just going to keep building these out in the same way. Go another round, trim it down to the thing, and then keep going until it's the size that you want it to be. Now, if you don't know what size you want it to be, let's say you're trying to end up with a triangular shape. So you can have either get a triangle, or if you have a piece of paper that's cut it out to the shape you want, and then you can work with that. Whatever you've got that tells you this is how big I want it to be. And then you say, okay, well, I got to keep going because I need to be able to trim this down, if that's what you're shooting for. You could also use, long skinny pieces if you're trying to make some sort of Dresden sort of thing. If you were going for this, maybe you're almost there with that one. If you said, well, no, I got to put at least one more piece here. So when you start getting to the right size, then you can start auditioning it. If you've got a ruler that's the size of approximately what you want it to be, you can kind of see what it's going to look like. So you can use all different kinds of methods. So you can also just eyeball it, and they don't have to be a particular size. If you're going to have them all wonky sized anyway, just build them until you're happy with them and then stick them together. So there's no rules. This is improv, right? So keep on building these out until you get it the size that you want. Okay, a couple of things. Let's say that you've cut this piece off right here, and it's pretty deep. Most of the little pieces, here's all the pieces that I've cut off mostly. They're all kind of like small little jibs. But this piece is kind of chunky. So what if I say, okay, I'm going to sew on, is it big enough for this? Yes, but do I like that blue there? Not really. So maybe if I sew it onto, oh, that side works. Okay, so if I just sew this together on here like this, then that gives me an extra little thing. So it doesn't have to be solid logs that you sew across here. It can be pieced things or leftover bits or whatever you like. So this would make a really cool looking thing if I sewed that together and added that onto it. So you can do all different sorts of things. Don't limit yourself. If you find, hey, I just kind of don't like where this is going for some reason, and you're like, I don't like it, but maybe if you added it onto right here as one of the logs on that side, well, that might be kind of cool. So don't limit yourself. If you start seeing things that look kind of strange and you don't like it, try cutting things up, sticking them back together in different ways, and you might like it better. For example, if I sewed all of this together, let's say if I just did this for some reason, and I think, gosh, I really just don't like this big chunk of fabric here in the middle. Well, I could just come in here and cut it in half and maybe turn things around and do it in a completely different way. So don't feel like you're stuck if you get to a point where you don't like it. Cut it up, put it together a different way, and you might like it better then. Okay, I've added a few more logs on. So I've come to this side and I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to sew something else onto this, I need to figure out where I'm going to cut this. So I have lots of different options. So let's think about it. If I just cut here, which might be the most obvious place to cut, that looks pretty cool. But what if I think sort of outside the box? I have to be careful right here, right? And I'm like, well, maybe I could cut sort of there, and then things end up being sort of triangular. That might be kind of cool. Or what if I say, gosh, I really wish I could come farther out here? Well, you can. All you have to do is turn like this, add another piece onto here before you try to cut this side. So just because you've been going around this way doesn't mean you have to keep on going around this way. You're not stuck. There's no rules, all right? So add a piece onto here if you want, and then do this side. Or go ahead and cut it off, do that side, and then do the other. Do whatever feels right. And if you need to, bust out the ruler of whatever size that you're going for and just see what it's going to look like if you put it in different places. So that's usually pretty helpful if you're, stuck and indecisive and can't make a decision. Usually I just go with it. I say, okay, I like that. And then I cut it. I don't second guess myself too terribly much. So that's how you would keep on going around on this. Let's say we're going to actually just cut this one here, which is kind of the obvious place, like I said. We might be able to recycle that bit. All right. And then we could just keep on going around. But we'll stop for now for the sake of this video. And there's what we came up with. So I hope you'll play around with some log cabin blocks and you'll try some different things, sew them to different sides, maybe start with this and build it out instead of keeping it in the middle. Try different things, see what floats your boat. And you can come up with some cool looking things that you can use in all kinds of improvisational work. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure you click that subscribe button and maybe turn on the notifications so you know when there's another episode. I'll see you next time for the next episode of the Quilty Life with me, Jenn George Burt.